Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are on the Changing Face of Mining with myself and my friends. My name is Peggy Bell. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for the Femina Collective and the host of the Changing Face of Mining. And today we're going to talk about mentorship. Just to start off with a land acknowledgement, I am joining you from the Michi-Sagig Anishinaabe territory, also known as Peterborough, Ontario. And when I was thinking about today's land acknowledgement, we were on a pre-call, and I learned that my friends on the call, some of them, do not do land acknowledgements as part of their Indigenous engagement. And in fact, the word that is typically used for their engagement purposes is Inuit, and not Indigenous or First Nations. So I just wanted to bring that to the table, that it is not a standardized practice. Engagement, community, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis is not a standardized practice, but very much not even customizable, but very much a personalized practice to those who work in that area. And what works for one nation does not necessarily work for the others. So that's something to keep in mind as we go about our business in natural resources. I will let the guests introduce themselves, and we'll start with my friend Ranjini, if you want to go first.
Hi, I'm Ranjini. I have had the opportunity to work with all three of you here. Currently working as a sustainability specialist at Baffinland. Well, the reason Peggy and I have had this conversation for a while now, the past couple of years, I went through a major career transition where I went from investor relations and finance focused roles to more sustainability and ESG focused role. And Peggy, Beth, and Megan, they had tremendous impact in that journey. And I'm looking forward to sharing that today.
Thank you. Welcome. Megan, do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Megan Lord-Hoyle. I'm an executive in the mining industry. I'm currently working with Ranjini at Baffinland. I've been in the industry for about 8 years. Prior to that, I wasn't in mining, but I had a long career in Indigenous engagement across Canada. I've been lucky enough to go almost everywhere in Canada and see how beautiful the country is. And had some great mentors along my way. So I'm really excited to engage in this discussion today.
Thank you. Beth?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Barodi, and I am the founder and CEO of the Femina Collective, and get to work with Peggy and know all of these women through the mining sector in some ways, either through Femina directly or, as Ranjini mentioned, working with Ranjini previously. And the idea and conversation around mentorship is one that is near and dear to my heart, because I think it is so multifaceted when it comes to both formal and informal mentorship relationships and opportunities. And I think within Femina, it's something that we just naturally try and foster across the board between our members and our community at large. So I'm very glad to be here today and being able to chat about this with you all.
Thank you. And so, yeah, just to set the stage of the discussion, this started out some time ago, where throughout my conversations with younger members of Femina Collective, I was incredibly impressed with the amount of self-awareness that they had on time, capacity, direction, where they wanted to go with their careers. And whereas when I was coming up through mining, or any career really, there was no discussion about capacity and what we were able to do. It was more anything that gets thrown at you, you do, and you do it with a smile on your face, and you do it well. But in many times when I'm talking to some of these younger members, the first question I'll ask is, do you have capacity for? And that is because they will come back to me and say, I don't have capacity for that right now. I don't have capacity for new clients. I don't have capacity for extra work, whatever that might be. And I was constantly impressed with their ability to say no. And how do we foster that as more senior leaders, as this ability to say no, because they did it so well. Regina was one of those people, which was fantastic. And also, too, was that we have a duty of care as mentors that we don't necessarily discuss. And what is that duty of care? And that came to me through a woman who works with a training organization about how does mentoring result in behaviors and leaders that we may not value as much anymore? Are we mentoring people with the skills that they need to lead authentically as themselves, or are we teaching poor behavior that we would not accept? And is that negatively impacting the talent pipeline? So I started out with talking about this with Ranjini. And so Ranjini, when you were coming up with some of your thoughts around mentorship, like what stands out in your career so far around mentoring and what you've experienced?
Okay, so Beth and I, we were on a 4-hour drive, and we started to get to know each other, and it sort of happened organically, and I think like she is somebody who wants women around her to grow and thrive. And she asked me a question. Like, I think for her, it was a very casual, genuine question. And for me, it was a very loaded question because I never thought about it like that. She's like, so what are your career goals? Like, what are you looking to do? Like, how do you want to expand your horizon? And I was like, oh my God, I always thought of vertical growth, and I never thought of like a lateral or horizontal growth, which would give me a much bigger foundation to build the vertical growth on. So I think that's where it started. It was so organic. And I think this is one of the things that I told Peggy, that mentors and leaders, they have the power to give you power to innovate, to do more. So I think that's how Beth became one of my mentors. And as Beth mentioned previously, Femina Collective is such a place that you can basically go to someone and ask them for advice, or interact with them, connect with them organically, or especially as a young professional in mining, I felt quite connected to, and it was very organic, and that's how I got to know Megan. And I met her at dinner, and she was so warm and open. It's like, oh yeah, nice to meet you. And she shared her experience, and she took genuine interest again, like in what my experience was, what I'm looking to do, and it was inspiring to see that, and it was inspiring to be a part of like be around women who are genuinely interested in growing the industry and people. And Megan is both a leader now, and also was an inspirational part. And now I get that whole mentorship part where she gives me the permission to innovate, to do more, and to basically lead in such a way that you have the platform to grow yourself. I think that's a very think like a blurry line between leadership and mentorship.
Yeah.
But I think like that's where that has always been the organic relationship that I've developed with both Beth and Megan.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there, because I think that one of the things that I found impressive about you, Ranjini, is that when you left the investor relations space, you immediately were like, I want to know how I can pivot into ESG sustainability. And you never lost sight of what that particular goal was. And so I think that understanding and having that clear guidance, or not even clear guidance, clear goal, whether that did come from, conversations that you had with Beth and Megan, was always very impressive to me, as opposed to, I'm just going to take whatever job comes my way. It's no, this is where I want to be, and that's how I want to get there. That's what and just continuing to stay focused on that. But your point that you brought up was the fuzzy line between leadership and mentorship. And we were talking about how management and leadership and mentorship, they might be kind of all the same, but they're not, right? So a leader and a mentor, like, because mentors can come in through different paths of your life. Your leaders are part of the organization. And then there's the manager, which really is around executing work. Like it's just like, this is the work you need to do and making sure that you do it. Megan, as a leadership piece, how do you find, like, is there a difference in your mind around leadership and mentorship? Would you qualify yourself as a mentor or a leader? How would you, we know you're a leader, but how would you qualify yourself as a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that in advance of this call. I mean, number one, I think when Ranjini sort of identified me as one of her mentors, right off the bat, I was like so honored. Like I was like, wow, I've never really seen that before. And although like my logical brain can say, yes, as a leader, there's also a mentorship capacity there to take on. But I was very honored to be recognized as a mentor. And I think that duty of care piece that you were talking about really comes into play. Like as you're identified as a mentor, as you understand that people start to look up to you, that duty of care is critically important, and understanding that you're helping someone else build their own lives in the way that they want to build it. So I think for me, the blurry line between leadership and mentorship, although I think they go very much hand in hand and go together, I think mentorship starts to blend into where you're starting to look at the person as a whole, where you're really starting to care about the individual that you're working with, and talk about their personal growth. And leadership, depending on where you are, but in this case, we're talking about a corporate context or a career context. Leadership, you have to keep an eye on what's good for the organization as a whole. And that's my role as a leader, is I need to protect the organization. I need to, strive for the organizational goals. And then mentorship brings in that personal piece of how do you bring an individual along that aligns with their goals. And in some cases, I think that can align with the organizational goals. And in some cases, I think you have to recognize as a mentor, this individual, this organization isn't at a space or place where we can help them achieve the goals that they're looking for. And that blend of, as a leader, then saying to another individual, like, yeah, we can't currently give you what you need, but I'm going to help you find that somewhere else. And I think that's for me where the break happens between just pure leadership versus mentorship.
Yeah. I definitely want to come back to that whole piece, because around mentorship is that, there could be times where the person that you're working with has kind of reached their limit if you are in the same organization, right? And so unless you're to leave, for example, like how do you continue to develop that person in a way that's responsible to that person, and really keeping that person ahead. So Beth, like, what are your thoughts around helping somebody that you work with and you want to see succeed and you care deeply about, but recognizing that that organization may not be the best place for them anymore? And how do you go about that duty to your mentee versus your duty to the organization, and how do you bridge that gap?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Megan just framed that really well. But just to take a step back, just listening to both Ranjini and Megan just share their perspectives, going Ranjini to that 4-hour car ride, I think that was one, we were driving from a mine site back to an airport. I think we've all been in those cars and those drives where it's like those conversations can either be really fantastic depending on who you're driving with, or like real dead quiet depending on who you're driving with. And I think Ranjini and I, during that drive, listened to a Sam Smith album at least 4 times over while we were chatting and talking about careers. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about support and mentorship is I had the same reaction that Megan did when Ranjini shared that the impact that drive and that conversation had on her when she had shared that with me post-drive. I also was not something where I went into that drive thinking, I'm going to mentor Ranjini during this drive. Mentor. It was that care of wanting to see someone who I think is absolutely phenomenal and talented thrive and be the best that they can be. And I think when that comes to those lines of how do you work with the people on your team or the people around you, to succeed, whether or not there is room for them in the organization or not. I think that is really crucial. And I remember a time, even with one of my own team members in a previous role, where her and I had that really frank conversation that Meg was just speaking about, that was around, listen, I don't know if there is space for you in the organization as we sit right now for what you want to achieve. And I want you to achieve more than what we're able to give you right now. So that means I expect that you're looking for other jobs right now. Put me down as your reference. If you find something that is a better fit for you, I want to speak and be able to say from your current manager, because who puts their current manager down as one of their references? That hardly ever happens. But I wanted them to know that I see you, I hear you. We're going to try and give you everything that we can within our capacity right now. But the fact of the matter is that this probably isn't going to be long-term for you at this point. And I think from that mentorship perspective, it's our responsibility. We want people to do that for us. We want to give that to other people. And the fact of the matter is when people are stalled in an organization, or when they don't get that support, they become disengaged. They become, the morale decreases. They become resentful of the company. Their productivity slows down. They're not happy anymore in the workplace, which then reflects and impacts the company, because then you're kind of needing to do extra work to try and motivate someone who just doesn't want to be there anymore. And so I think there is a balance of trying to find what works within the organization or within your own leadership and team. But there is nothing wrong with moving people along as well. And I think the beauty of this industry is it's a small industry. We generally all know each other. We generally know someone at another company, or we've heard of someone who's looking to fill a role. And I think that just as we would want people to do it for us, being able to make connections and make those networking opportunities happen is so important. And I think Ranjini is a great case of that, from going from investor relations over to the sustainability side. I remember the day she walked into my office and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Do you think there's any roles like this?" And I thought, my goodness, yes, the way the industry is moving right now, you are nailing a trend that is so needed from an ESG disclosure and investor relations crossover. And hearing that was so exciting, because she is an innovator. She is super talented. And she immediately just started doing her own research and would bring research to me and be like, here's what I'm seeing here. Here's what this report's saying. Or what do you think about this? And just having those informal conversations that weren't set in any sort of set mentorship program or anything like that. It was just the informal conversations of batting ideas back and forth was so valuable for me, because I was learning so much from learning the investor relations side of things, while also hopefully giving her some insights on that as well. So I think, as Megan said, it really is that mentorship is looking at the person as a whole. That's what it's about, and looking at where is this person best going to thrive.
Yeah. I want to pick up on that reciprocal relationship of mentorship, because I do think that we often focus too heavily on the senior mentoring the junior. And so, Ranjini, like, how do you see what we can learn from you? Like, we have never, like, have you ever been approached saying, "Hey, you are amazing, I want you to mentor me," by a senior woman? Or do you think that, like, is a whole missed part of the mentorship piece that we could be approaching more?
I think, Peggy, I'm gonna go back to your point where you said, like, our, like, the younger people coming into the industry, they can say no. They know their capacity. So when I want to approach say somebody who I look up to and want to be mentored by them, even if I ask, like, "Oh, do you have capacity to do that?" I almost always feel like they do that out of, like, obligation.
Right.
And sometimes they can't say no. So I really appreciated how the dialogue with Beth and Megan, they were very organic. And again, as you both of you recognize that you didn't even realize that you were mentoring me. So, I mean, that means that you actually had the capacity to be able to build that relationship. So I think that is one of the biggest things. Like, I think mentors can look at if they actually have the capacity to do it. And that's why it becomes more organic, and recognizing that yes, this person wants to grow, and like keeping that. I think like this like with what I saw with all of you here is that we want to grow the industry and have an impact on the industry. So I feel that's the duty of care to younger professionals coming in, is that what do you want to do? Please don't leave the industry, because what can we do to help? What can we do to grow? So I think this is a whole new generation of leaders who would like me and anybody coming in to innovate. Like as Beth mentioned, she gave me the opportunity to innovate, and then I see that with Megan as well. Like there's a certain degree of trust that yes, I'm a leader, and I know that you're going to do great work, and that's why you're here. And yeah, that is definitely something that I got from all of you here.
Yeah. Megan, what about you? Like, as far as reverse mentorship, have you ever thought about taking, like, intentionally, I guess, taking on somebody who's younger to teach you about what their like challenges, thoughts, concerns are, how to keep them in the industry longer, instead of us continuing to work in one way, but changing the workplace to suit what their needs are?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer it. I mean, I think the word intentionally there makes me feel like I'm going to answer no. Like I don't think I've done that intentionally today. Right. That said, I am paying intentional attention to the younger folks on my team. Mm-hmm. And I recognize now that they have different needs than I had when I was coming up. I also can look back at my career development and say, I kind of wish I had some of these things in place as I was coming up that weren't necessarily available to me. And not to say that I haven't had great mentors along the way. I really have in some cases. And in other cases, I've asked someone to be my mentor and they just flat out said no. A woman who I very much respected, I wanted her to mentor me, and she was just like, no, you have to learn the way I did, which is do it on your own. And, you know, that is what it is. But yeah, I mean, so I am really paying attention to the younger workforce right now and understanding what their needs are and how I can help facilitate that. And I think, but I do like the idea, and I will think about that concept a lot more, to sort of go out and intentionally find someone to say, you know, will you mentor me in the same way and give me the same sort of feedback that you might be expecting from me, whether that's organic or whether it's like a formal setup. But that organic relationship is happening anyways, just by working together and paying attention to people and understanding what's working and what's not working. But I do think, like, I think another piece as a leader that's really challenging, and especially with the younger workforce who are quite ambitious and who really do understand what they're looking for and what they want, is going back to that piece. As an organization, we can't always do that for you, and trying to balance that. And when you have someone good as a leader, obviously you want them to stay on your team. Like, obviously the strength of your team is a good reflection on the organization as a whole. So understanding that you might lose someone because we can't give that to you is really, it's a very challenging piece. And as a leader, finding that balance between how do I keep this person, but how do I not hold them back, is really hard. And Ranjini's role is actually a really good example of, I've had failures in where I wasn't able to accommodate what someone was looking for. And looking back now, I don't think I handled those situations as well as I wish I would have. And relationships soured as a result of it. And there was someone looking to move up, and I just couldn't create or innovate a new role given where we were as an organization, given the challenges we were facing, et cetera. And that was a really difficult time period to go through. But in Ranjini's case, we met through Femina. I know that I had a need on my team. I couldn't really describe what it was, but I knew sort of in myself what I was looking for and what I needed. The more Ranjini and I were talking about her bridge between investor relations and sustainability, I was like, there's something there. There's something there that I want to hook onto. And eventually we sort of co-created the role that Ranjini has taken on. And I found that super refreshing. It was great. Like I approached it as, you know, Ranjini, here's something that I'm thinking of, but I really need your feedback too,
Right.
because you have that investor relations side that I don't have. So what's the linkages here that we can create together? And I think so far it's been really successful. And that's been a great case where I think there was some mentorship of like, where do you want to be, Ranjini? What do you want to focus on? Here's what I need. Is there something that we can do together here that's going to help you succeed, but also help my organization be successful? And I think that was a cool case where I would say it was reverse mentorship, also, you know, related to a specific job need, but it was a really interesting sort of development through that time. But I am really going to think about that concept more of like an intentional mentorship.
Yeah, it came out of my time with the engineering design firm I worked for. My boss at the time, so we had a very, I shouldn't even say it wasn't formalized mentorship program, but she did come to the senior leadership team, which I sat on, and said, you know, like we need to start thinking about mentoring some of these young people. And she was in a reverse mentorship relationship where she was speaking to somebody weekly about what they needed and how they saw the workforce developing. And so this person was a couple years out of university. And I've always thought it would be an interesting thing as far as maybe somewhat self-serving, but around the neurodiversity part is how do we, more and more people are being diagnosed. How do we reflect that increase in diagnosis and begin to look at the how reverse mentorship could be an opportunity. But you did bring up something that was my experience around that discussion piece and reflection around where Ranjini brought value. I was telling Ranjini and Megan about this, but this was something that I've experienced with Beth, is that Beth is one of the first leaders and mentors who's ever reflected back onto me what my value was to the organization. Like previous to the Femina Collective, I was probably like, well, I can do these things. I have no idea if I'm good at them. Right? And so in conversations, you know, you're part of a startup and everything is constantly evolving, and you need to understand where, you know, Beth needs to focus and I need to focus and where's our own unique value. That was one of the, you know, going from a member to a employee, we had to redefine what that relationship looked like, really. And it was a totally different process that we had to go through. And that was something that I always appreciated, is that Beth was reflecting back what she thought my value was. And she's very good at saying to me, we had a conversation about a month ago where she's just said, I don't want you to even look at this document. I have sent it to you. You can look at it but I don't want to hear your feedback. I just want you to look at it and think about it, because this is where you bring value and this is where I need you to focus right now. And so for me, that was fairly transformative, because I could say, this is where I bring value to an organization because it's been reflected back to me. So Beth, like, is that just part of your personality? Like, is there like a mentor that taught you your own leadership style? Like, is there an experience that you've had that where this is a positive leadership thing that I bring to the table and I was taught it by XYZ? Or
I have so many thoughts from what was just shared. And so if I go off on random tangents, feel free to pull me back in. I think when listening to what's being shared right now and the whole idea of reverse mentorship, the whole idea of like being able to reflect values back, I think that the term mentor or mentorship or are you a mentor can come with a lot of ego. And a lot of people really like the title of mentor. And so the idea of reverse mentorship could be seen as an ego hit, because I am a mentor because I am experienced and I have something that you want to learn from me. And it's kind of this elevated status, is that what people can kind of feel with it, where you really need to strip that ego away and realize that, you know, you have something to bring for someone else, but that person equally has something to bring either for you or for someone else as well. And so I think that mentorship in that sort of way ebbs and flows. And I think of that even with my own coach, which all three of you know, Carmen Turner, who I used as a coach for years and years. And I would have said that she was one of my mentors, where our relationship turned into a friendship and turned into kind of these like things that we now do with our podcast, and we do things together. But it ebbs and flows between the two of us, where sometimes I'm mentoring her, other times she's mentoring me. And we just have a lot of trust built between us and a lot of respect for each other. And we know through and through, no matter what, that we want the best for each other. And so that then means that we give each other hard feedback sometimes. That means that we praise each other sometimes. That means that we don't necessarily always agree, but that's okay. And all of that, I think, really makes for like a really strong mentorship aspect between the two of us. I think when I look at my own mentors, up until I would say the last 6 months, most of my mentors have all been men. And I think I think, Meg, I've had a similar experience with a woman that I asked specifically to mentor me. I got the same response. It was like, no, I had to go through the hard knocks, therefore you do too, which I think is just insane, is an insane response. But it's been really nice recently to find women who I now see as mentors for me, who are within the industry, who are more senior, who have a lot more experience. And I know that they also value what I bring to the table too. They get a lot from my energy and from my ideas. And so again, it is a bit more of that reciprocal approach. I think, Peggy, when it comes to you and I, what's been really unique in our relationship is the learnings that I've had on that neurodivergent front. I think working with you, working with others in Femina who have who are neurodivergent. My husband is neurodivergent. My son is neurodivergent. I'm surrounded by neurodivergent people. And it has been an extreme learning curve for me to learn how I show up and how I lead in these areas, regardless of the relationship, whether it's a family, friend, personal, or professional. And I think I remember the conversation we had where you said, I'm really adverse to feedback. I generally don't like feedback. It hits me really hard, those sorts of things. And I was genuinely surprised by that, because I feel like I've given feedback of all kinds to you. And you've always taken it really, really well. And so when you shared that with me, I thought, okay, why didn't I realize that? Or why didn't I know this about Peggy? And how has my delivery been? And I think it again comes back to that level of trust. I think, again, it is that knowing, you know, that I want the best for you. You know that I value and appreciate you. I think my love language is words of affirmation, regardless of where I show up in life, work or the other. I love checking in with people. I love letting people know how much I appreciate them. I love when I see something great happen to someone, being able to like praise them for that. And so I think that is certainly part of it. But I think within those mentorship relationships, I really prefer when they organically and informally kind of form, because they're forming on trust and they're forming on kind of that ability to really lean on someone else, as opposed to being matched with someone who's like, now you two must work together and now you must have a mentor-mentee relationship. Those can be great. Those programs can be really fantastic for specific outcomes that you're looking for. But I think for that kind of long-term relationship piece, it needs to come with that trust. And then the last thing I'll say, because I've been talking for a long time, is we're talking a lot about mentoring younger people. I think one of the things that we realized in Femina this year, and the whole reason why we launched the experience for next year, was this whole realization around, once women kind of get to the level that I got to, or that Meg's currently in, we just think, okay, they don't need mentorship anymore. They're done. They've made it. They're at the senior levels. And so they're done. Where we actually just need a different form of mentorship now. We need to be able to look at at things differently. We need to have different contacts and different networks and different women coming around us to help us. And so mentorship isn't just for one stage of your career or your life. I think it needs to change and evolve. And it shouldn't just always be expected that senior women are mentoring these like junior level women. It should be kind of across the board, and recognition that we all continue to need mentorship in different forms, regardless of what titles or levels we get to within the industry.
Yeah.
And I'll stop there. That was a lot. So I'll just.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, Beth. It is something, and obviously I'm part of the experience, so I believe in it deeply. But I think that's so true. We need mentorship at any stage that we're in, and how and when we get that can change dramatically. I think most of my mentors have also been men as I've gone through my career, and I think that's probably just a product of our generation, by and large. But now, like being in Femina and being kind of that intentional piece again, Peggy, like it occurred to me just a couple of years ago that I was like, oh, I really need mentors right now. And I've had an executive coach, and that's been hugely helpful, but it is a slightly different piece. Coaching is different than mentorship, and that holding on to that mentorship and making sure that you have that surrounding you, someone who's looking at you as a whole. It's great to have in the industry, but I also believe it doesn't necessarily need to be in the industry. Like I think you can find mentors in a lot of different avenues and places, and yeah, that is something that I think is crucially important for all stages of life.
Yeah, I agree. Beth says that her love language is words of affirmation. I told her this weekend that my love language was gift giving. So
that's what this painting is behind me is a gift from Peggy that I received this week. Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot of discourse out there in the leadership snippets of the TikTok world, where as you move throughout your career, what are some of the hardest gaps to bridge, right? And so one of them would be going from a doer and having to provide a certain type of information to senior management versus a strategic person. And how does that information change, right? So you're not necessarily giving all of the details anymore on what has happened. So not leading in indicators in the past. Sorry, my brain just totally blanked on that. But now you're giving like future strategy pieces, and how does that change? And I think that's one piece of mentorship that really needs to come out, whether that is an executive coach or some other avenue. Just the last question before we get to the final question is around like mentorship gone bad, really. So how does I've definitely been in the position where I've asked somebody to be a mentor, and that mentor became like too much of a friend, where it was still a productive relationship, but she was my friend and not my mentor anymore. And there's also, when mentor is used very poorly, and it puts women in harm's way from an harassment point, right? So it's used as grooming, it's used as another avenue. What are your thoughts around so that's the duty of care too, is around how is mentorship used to ensure that mentee is retaining authenticity, safety. You are not necessarily becoming a duplicate of the mentor, but somebody who's standing in their own confidence because of the mentorship. I'll start with Ranjini. Any thoughts around, would you recognize that? Do you think how does that come about? Does it show up for you at all? I assume not, since Megan's on.
I definitely think the professional safety bit, I think we all discuss, is a big part of it. And also recognizing as a mentee, if there is professional trust here to ask for mentorship, or even if I have the space, how much should I disclose about my future goals and what I'm looking to do? because sometimes, as Megan said, like the organization might not have the capacity to do that for you, but they wouldn't necessarily even like work always in your best interest to help you create that for yourself, both within or outside the organization. So I think there has been not like direct experiences, but instances where the professional safety to like tiptoe around it. Yeah, so I just that is one experience that I have had.
Yeah. Megan, Beth, anything to add there?
I'll say I had one experience with a woman who I really respected. I still have a lot of respect for her and the work that she does, and I thought that she was going to be a really great mentor for me. And as our relationship built and developed, I quickly realized that there was a lot of competition happening between us. And whereas all of a sudden, anything that I was doing, she'd be like, "Oh, let me review this if you want before you pass it to whoever," or like, "Let me feedback so that it's good." And everything that I put forward to her was not good enough, which at first I thought, okay, this is good feedback. I'm going to learn, I'm developing. But I realized that no matter what I did, nothing was remotely good enough. It was only criticized. I was never getting any positive feedback. And I realized, okay, she doesn't actually want to see me succeed. She wants to make sure that she has line of sight on where my career is going, but she doesn't want me to succeed in what I want to achieve. And so thankfully I recognized that. So nothing, disastrous happened. And I was able to kind of distance myself from that. And kind of, it just slowly kind of died. The relationship kind of died out, which probably was for the best. But what it really showed me was combating that ego and competitiveness again. I think we all are faced with it. We all have a bit of that in us as women. We're taught to do that. We're taught to compete. We're taught that there's only so much space for us to be in the same area. And so I know it's something I have to check in myself all the time as well, is like, making sure that competitiveness doesn't come out in a negative way or negatively impacts anyone that I'm talking to, or any other women that are in the industry. So I do think that you have the autonomy and you have the ability to say yes or no to mentorship as well. You have the ability to say, just if someone's offering it to you, it doesn't mean that you need to take it. You can say it's actually not good for me, or it's not what I'm looking for, or it's just not the right fit. And you are able to move on from that. And that shouldn't have any sort of negative consequence on you.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, definitely. That whole consent still goes for mentorship relationships. Absolutely. Megan, anything else to add on that one?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of what Beth just said, I think could be like a whole nother show. The competitive piece.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've certainly encountered that over the years, and also have to try to be really conscious that that's not something I'm bringing forward as well. Like, so I do think that is a constant check-in to be like, where is my ego at? Like, where is my competitive nature coming out in a positive or negative way? And ensuring that there is enough space for women in this industry. We need more women in this industry. So ensuring that they're able to have that space, I think, is so critically important. But it can be challenging, without a doubt. I am trying to think of like I think I feel pretty lucky right now. I can't immediately think of an example of where I had a mentorship, like one of my mentor relationships go sour necessarily. I mean, some of them just never took off.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think I have an example of where something is soured. So I think that I'm pretty actually privileged, I think, to be able to say that, unless I've just blocked that memory out.
Okay, last question is always, Beth may run out of advice for herself. She keeps so much coming on the show. What would the Ranjini, Meg, and Beth of today tell the Ranjini, Meg, and Beth of whenever you entered the industry? What's like the one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Ooh. It's a
Ranjini?
difficult question live.
I know. That's why I always leave it to the end. You got to think.
Yeah.
This is the time to cough and breathe. Ranjini, do you want to start?
Sorry, my internet probably just glitched a little bit. Can you repeat that question again?
See, look at this is how she's trying to get out of it. I said,
Buying yourself time.
what would the Ranjini of today tell the Ranjini of however many years ago when you were getting into the industry? What's the piece of advice that you would give her?
Give her yes, I think I would not approach someone who looks at me and looks at any young professional entering the industry as inexperienced versus what I had with Beth and Megan. They saw it as new experience.
Mm,
So definitely something I would told myself to distinguish between.
I like that. I really like that one. I think that's a good one. Beth?
You're right. I feel like I have shared a few things before. I think mine would certainly be like stand in your confidence. I think for someone who was brought into the industry for being different, being able to find a mentor was challenging because I was a bit of an anomaly. People didn't really know what to do with me. And I would just say, to kind of what Ranjini was just saying, the experience that I brought to the table may have seemed inexperienced for the industry, but was immensely valuable for what the industry needs. And so owning that confidence and standing in that confidence and knowing that there are people who will see that in you and will want to foster that and will want to help you grow in the ways that they can offer that help. And not feeling like you need to assimilate in with the behaviors that are around you.
Yeah, I like that one too. What about you, Megan?
Mine is
The last word.
So similar to Beth's actually, but I think I would have described it differently. I think mine would be remember to be authentic. And I think that is a confidence piece too. I think to be authentic, you also have to have the confidence to do that. But I think if you're authentic and if you're bringing who you are to the table, your values, your beliefs, that will guide you immensely. And I think that does allow you to show up and say, this is who I am. And this is what I feel I can deliver and be good at. And if this is not the place for me in order to succeed at that, or it's not something that's valued on the other side, then being okay to say, this isn't the right place for me. I think that just remembering to be authentic and truly allow who you are and your values to guide you is something that I would definitely have said to myself many years ago.
Amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. I greatly appreciate your time that you've spent today. And I look forward to continuing to learn from all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been great.
Sorry, Megan?
I said this has been great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We do have our last year-end call on December 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to be interviewing, well, Beth will be taking on that one, and we'll be interviewing all types of senior leaders from the sector. And please join us, and we'll see you all on the other side.
Great.